All right, we got no intro music today. I don't know what the hell happened there. But anyway, well, welcome to this weekend's wrap, round 10 versus GWS. Tonight I've got with me Nikki New. How you going, Nikki?
Not too bad. Bit sore.
But you're always sore, and we're not going to have that conversation
I know.
again. This is a respectable show, not like Tuesday Night Live, so... let's just move
Hang
on.
on,
What?
It
Sorry?
was respectable. What are you doing on it?
Oh, wow. Just fired a shot early. And thankfully, for me, I'm also joined tonight by Scorpus. Welcome to the Sunday Wrap, mate. How you going?
Yeah, not too bad. Enjoyed the win over GWS on the weekend, so yeah, in good spirits.
Looking forward to a lively discussion this evening. Always some good banter on the boards after a win, and especially given that got a little bit tight towards the end of the game. But anyway, we'll go on about that in a little moment. Firstly, though, the weekend's results, and Friday night we had Sydney messing up my tips from the outset, beating the Kangaroos quite comfortably, really, by 26 points. The Roos never really looked in it, and I don't think they played particularly well, to be honest. Saturday we had the Hawks over the Lions. After the Lions gave a pretty good showing for half the game, the Hawks ended up getting up by 48 points. We had the Power getting up over a disappointing Melbourne at Traeger Park by 45. Saints, again after a solid showing from the Dockers for a little while, ran all over the top of them and won by 34. The Tigers a predictably comfortable win over the Bombers by 38. And then today we had Carlton, a fantastic win over the Cats, 104 to 85, getting up by 19 points. The Bulldogs a scrappy win over the Magpies by 21. And the
Lucky
Eagles,
win.
Yeah, I didn't watch the game. You can fill me in on that in a sec, Nick. And the Eagles, 77-point win over the Suns at home. Probably did it in a bit of a canter. I don't know how many people you reckon watched that game. About 5?
I would have been one of them. Well, it was on in the background.
Yeah. So what happened with the Bulldogs game, Nick?
Start of the last quarter, Collingwood had absolutely nobody on the bench, so they had to run out that entire last quarter with no rotations off the ground.
Okay.
And Collingwood had been playing well. And I think if they'd had at least maybe one or two on the bench, they might have held on.
Yeah,
to
3
win that
points
game.
up at
So
3 points up at three-quarter time, yeah.
Yeah. And that's when I was listening to the call on the drive back from the game, that last little bit of the third quarter, and the commentators on that, even Brian Taylor was actually barracking for Collingwood over the Western Bulldogs, considering how much, I know he did play for Collingwood, but he still has such a love for the Bulldogs. He was actually saying there as well that the Bulldogs are very lucky. And he was questioning a couple of the umpiring decisions as well, but I think by the sounds of it from Carey, etc., they were possibly there, so that might have been okay. But the consensus on the radio was that Collingwood were the better team for the majority of the game. It was just injuries that crippled them.
Yeah, just personnel.
And Buckley was apparently very not happy with his medical staff, because Fasolo hurt his shoulder. They took him down the rooms. They brought him back up and they immediately started to ice it. And so at three-quarter time, he talked to Fasolo, made Fasolo take the ice off, sent him back down the rooms, obviously, to get a jab to try and fix it or make him available to come back on. They were doing handball tests on the sidelines, and apparently one of the handballs that he went to market probably actually just dislocated the shoulder out even more. And so the docs then just put the ice back on him. So it was a case of Buckley should have been listening to his medical staff.
Fair enough. But now, you're a seasoned professional, Nikki, so I'm only going to say this once, and I'm very disappointed. Watch your bloody headphones or your earring or whatever the heck's going on there.
Oh, sorry. That's my top, keeping me warm.
Ah, right.
I'll hold it up.
Right. So that dispels another rumour that Nikki does the podcast topless. Anyway, we'll move on.
I don't think that was ever a rumour. Seriously. I'm going to smack you.
Thankfully, you're not sitting next to me. Right, so just running through the ladder. We've got the Roos still on top on 36 points. One game back, we've got the Swannies, who look really impressive. They're midfield at the moment with Tommy Mitchell hitting form. They look really good at the moment. They're probably, in my view anyway, probably the form side of the comp at the moment. The Cats...
I'm just annoyed they cost me.
Yeah.
I had them by 23 points, bastards.
No. That's not costing you. I had the Kangaroos. That's costing you. Yeah.
I'm so annoyed I didn't go with my gut about Carlton.
Yeah, well, just let me run. Jesus, just let me run through the ladder, for God's sakes. We've got numerous teams on 28 points: the Cats, the Giants, the Eagles, and the Bulldogs and Hawthorn. Then we got the Mighty Crows, one back in 8th spot, but one clear on 24 points. And then we've got 3 teams on 20, Melbourne, Port and Carlton. And you'd have to say that Carlton are making a bit of a run at it at the moment. Not playing bad football at all. And then Collingwood, St Kilda, Richmond on 16, the Suns on 12. And then we're down to the Lions and Essendon and Fremantle yet to open their account. And not even looking like it. The Fremantle-Essendon game is going to be a bit of an interesting one.
Where's that one being played?
I'm not sure.
Domain Stadium.
Oh, that's a shame. You'd think if it was in Melbourne.
Yeah. They could actually go through a season winless.
Unbelievable.
But they're totally not tanking.
No, not at all. Isn't it strange? I mean, you remember a couple of years ago, West Coast did the same thing. They went from top 4 to bottom and then bounced back up again. And Lions predicting a similar outcome for Freo, and I wouldn't doubt it either. They're not actually that many short. It's just a different game style and a couple of injuries and whatnot. Anyway, never mind. Let's move on to our game, the one that everyone's listening for. We had the Crows, 15 goals, 17, shock and kicking, particularly in the first half, 107. To the Giants, 13 goals, 7, 85. Their last quarter of 5 goals, probably flattering them slightly. So a pretty good win by the Crows. In fact, I reckon probably our most important win for the season, even more important than Sydney, given the state of play on the ladder at the moment. Your thoughts, Nick?
Yeah, I reckon in terms of an overall performance, yes, we had the poor kicking. They fought back in that last quarter, but overall, we controlled pretty much that whole game. The Sydney game was a bit of an ebb and flow back and forth, and it was a really tight, great tussle. But yeah, I reckon you're right that that's probably our most important win for the season so far.
What do you reckon, Scorpus?
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to get back in form against a team that's quite well rated, and GWS, of course, were going extremely well before they came over to face us. So, I mean, considering how we were going in the prior weeks, it's really important that we were able to get some of our guns back in form. I think Smith in particular was one of the players I haven't been impressed with over the past couple of weeks, but he was pretty decent on the weekend. So yeah, just things like that. I think it was a very important win for us, and yeah, probably the most significant one this season so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just run through the match stats, and there's a couple of things that really stood out to me. Disposals were pretty even, 370 to 389, but our kick to handball ratio was almost 1 in 2, which, and I'll discuss that in a bit more detail with you guys in a minute, but certainly indicative of the tactics or the strategy or game plan that we brought to the table. We out-tackled them 56 to 44, which was nice. What else is notable there? 62 inside 50s to 52. We scored just about every second time we went into inside 50, so had we been more accurate, obviously the game would have been over a lot sooner. 71% effective disposals, so over that 70% pass mark, which is good, pretty good in a tight contest. 18 marks inside 50, which is a really good result for us, and again indicative of some game plan that was evidence there. And the area that we all thought we were going to get hammered in turned out to be our strength, which was really pleasing, 38 clearances to 27 for the night. So overall, and just as a bit of a general comment, it seemed to me that we were intent on clearing the contest very quickly by foot, and it also seemed to me that we were very intent on hitting up short passes. Our forward entries were very, very different to what they've been over the past few weeks.
And it could have been even greater stats because McGovern and Jenkins just couldn't quite get their hands on it. They were getting into the right spots. Jenkins, I think a couple of those kicks were probably to the far side of him, hence that little one arm sticking out to the side going up, which I know you hate, Feenix.
Yeah, I thought he competed all right. So that could have
been better. Yeah, he still did really well. Being at the ground, really happy with how he went. He just seemed to have that little touch of the fumbles. He couldn't quite get it, but he still tried and put on some great pressure. The other one that's interesting to me, and so here's some work from Danos if he's listening, that 2 for 1, or that we score every second entry into the forward 50, that's probably been on par, I think, with what we've been all year so far. And isn't that the best in the AFL?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is. And unfortunately, our 24.2% inside 50s to goal percentage is down on what we've been doing. We've been reasonably accurate up until this week, so hopefully just a blip. But it seemed to me that, and we'll go through some individual stats in a minute, but it seemed to me that, and the stats bear this out, that every player had a role to play. And for probably the best part of the game, certainly the first 3 quarters, everyone played their role. It was a very concerted effort and a concerted game plan, and it was it bears out in the stats.
Yeah, the one thing I really wanted to touch on was that we'd finally addressed the issue of us pressing up too high, and a lot of our defenders seemed to be sitting back a little bit more than they'd been in the past couple of weeks when those entries were coming in. So we didn't see as many really cheap GWS goals. Really, really happy with that on the weekend.
Yeah, true. I'll just run through some individual stats and then we'll just talk about the match in general. Rory Atkins, another really good game, 28 disposals, 7 inside 50s, running at about 78.5% disposal efficiency. Brodie Smith, I think, had almost his best game for the year, 26 disposals, 8 inside 50s, running at 73%, 9 rebound 50s as well. Was excellent game by Brodie and good to see him back in touch. Scotty Thompson, 22 touches, 5 tackles, 14 contested possessions. He really is a beast. I thought Dougie had a bit of a return to form. I mean, he's shot the goal at the last. If he doesn't have to pay a fine for that, then there's something wrong with the club. But he was very in and under. He's still out of touch in my view, but his effort was really good. 20 posies, 7 tackles, 12 contested possessions, 7 clearances from Dougie, so that was a good return. Jared Lyons, I think, also did well. 20 touches, 10 contested, 6 clearances. And the interesting thing about all our midfielders, and this is where I'm getting at with regards to players playing a role, we had Atkins, Smith, Lyons, all almost 2 for 1 on their kick-to-handball ratio. They're our outside players, although Jared is a little bit more inside, but he was playing outside a little bit. And then we had Scotty Thompson and Rory Sloane, the exact opposite. Scotty Thompson had 8 kicks, 14 handballs. Sloane had 6 kicks, 11 handballs. So I think they really addressed that whole thing that you hate, Scorpus, that getting sucked into the contest. We had a couple of nominated players that were our contested beasts, and then we had blokes sitting on the outside that didn't get sucked in, that we were able to give that first quick give out of the stoppage and then clear with a kick. Is that the way you saw it, mate?
Oh, definitely. I think the one thing that they really switched up was that they let Scotty Thompson and Sloan do all their inside work, as you were saying. And I was always mentioning in the previews and everything that Tomo was the guy who's really annoyed with getting sucked into the contest all the time. But if he's the guy who's actually designated to go for the ball when it's his turn to go, then by leaving those guys like Lyons, Douglas, Smith and Atkins on the outside, then that really helps stop people getting sucked in and improves our structure dramatically around those stoppages. And it really worked extremely effectively on the night.
How'd you see it, Nick?
What I found most interesting at the game was actually Sloane's role. It's not so much that he was our inside player. He was stopping Ward and he was stopping the third jumper up. The fact that he only gave away 2 frees, doing so, pretty damn good. He was annoying the crap out of them because they could not get their clear little free hit out that they like to do. So there were, as you said, there were some very clear designated roles in our midfield, and no matter who went in there, that's what they play to. And it was really clear that the structures they held together for the 3 quarters. They started to break apart, I think, when we tied a little bit, and GWS were really challenged to lift by Cameron for that last quarter.
Yep. I thought... Sorry, go on, Scorpus.
Yeah, I also thought that, like you were saying, with Sloan taking on Ward, I also noticed, I think it was a lot of Thompson and Douglas rotating through Dylan Shield. I thought Shield, he had 29 touches on the night. I thought he was almost completely ineffective. I thought he was practically useless.
I remember looking at his disposal efficiency after the game.
62%.
And that's really low for somebody of his quality.
Yeah, and 20 uncontested possessions as well. So he was not getting anything in the contest, and he wasn't able to use his pace and his usually quite good disposal in and around those stoppages. I thought that was a really good job on the weekend.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed just on the midfield again, I've been banging on about this, Scotty Thompson's time on ground. And I don't know whether it's because we didn't have the crouches in, but it was far more balanced this week. We had Scotty Thompson 72% time on ground, Dougie 79, Jared Lyons 64, Charlie Cameron 85. He had some cameos. We had Rory, Sloan 76. So far more balanced and quite a contrast to GWS, whose midfielders were up in the mid to high 80s. In fact, Tom Scully spent 91% time on ground, which is quite surprising. But all their other mainstream midfielders basically spent around about the 80 to 85% time on ground. So I feel like when we manage Tomo's time on ground a little bit better, we get better output from him. And I know that Tomo had a bit of a rest towards the end of the last quarter, which probably impacted that a bit, but I still believe that we managed our midfield rotations a lot better this week.
And also when talking about the midfield, we should probably also talk about Jacob's job on Mummy, because that was so good at the ground.
Oh, definitely. He did a lot of, I think, nullifying the real strengths that Mummy has in his ability to just, smash everyone. Of course, he lost the hit-outs by 6, but I think he fought extremely well and had a number of really good hits out to our advantage of our mids. And our mids also did a quite good job at reading the taps from Mumford whenever he won them. So I thought Jacobs was a bit better in terms of his form compared to these past couple of weeks at least.
Yeah, I thought he did really well, and I actually saw him jump a few times at the ruck contest, which I haven't actually seen for a while, which was good. The only one we didn't read off Mumford was the one where he actually likes to hit over the inside players, and they seem to read that quite well, and a couple of times they got some clearances from Mummy getting enough on the tap to actually get it over the inside players and get it to the outside of the stoppage. But overall, I think that was probably Sam's best game for a while, because Mummy tends to have his measure a bit.
I think, if anything, he was a bit less effective around the ground. I noticed a couple of clangers, I would have to say, from him in terms of his disposal, but in terms of his ruck work, that was the real issue over the opening rounds, and it seems like he definitely fixed it up.
And I have to say, it was very interesting to finally figure out why Mummy is able to run into the forward 50 so easily. It's because he likes to pull his man down somewhere in the centre square so that they're on the ground, and he keeps running in all on his own. 3 umpires out there, none of them saw it happening.
Oh, yeah. And to be honest with you, he was probably, had they not come back in the last, I think Mumford would have ended up getting reported because he was getting increasingly agitated and certainly lining up a couple of our players, if not off the ball, then certainly late. He doesn't mind throwing his weight around.
Oh, a few others were sniping as well. They're really going after Lynch, particularly in the second quarter.
Yeah, they did. Toby Green was another one that Jakey Lever got under his skin a bit.
And Hartigan was actually playing on Cameron for most of the first half, and Cameron just really did not like it because Hartigan just uses his body so well, and he will get in your face and he'll stand there and basically dare them to hit him.
Probably a good segue to have a brief chat about the defence. I thought our defence was excellent.
Awesome.
Obviously we talked about GWS's midfield strength, but they do have an awesome forward line as well with those 3 tools there, Patton, Cameron and Lob. And we did a job on them, basically. We were able to carry VB in our defensive half despite all that and still not leak a losing score. And I thought the 3 tools in particular did really well. I thought Lukey Brown did a job. But the standout for me, and irrespective, and you can have a comment in a second, Nikki, but Kyle Chaney's job on Stevie J, not only just in keeping Stevie J quiet, but also pissing him off, was first rate.
Oh, yes. It was stunning, and it was so good to watch at the ground. Chaney, we know, isn't the quickest bloke. I mean, he's not too bad, but he's got great footy nous and great anticipation. And I said on the board that the GWS banner had, their saying was that Stevie J's going to do some magic from the Eddie Betts pocket. And initially when I saw it, I thought, hang on, Eddie's got more than one pocket. He's got 4 now at the Oval. So which one's he going to do it from? And then I jokingly made the comment that I didn't understand that the magic Stevie J was going to do was disappear. Which he did. He had to really go right back to our half-forward line to try and get a kick. Just the work that the defence did as well. And I want to give a brick back to the crowd who don't understand the modern game. Once again, when we were doing those kicks back, our defence would get one outside, they'd look up the line. Pretty much all of GWS has pressed on one side of the ground to congest that space. And so we'd immediately do the quick kicks across the face of goal, back out the other side to take it down the other wing, which made them spread. The crowd didn't like it because they're like, oh, just kick it forward. Have a look at all the GWS players. That's why we're not doing that. It is smart play. We did it quickly. And the reason we did it quickly was because Henderson... There was a man behind me. I appreciated he could sit there because he had as much Henderson hate as I do. We pissed Henderson off out of the back lines. He played, when he came back on, he played entirely on the wing. He was not playing in the back lines. That's why our back line did so well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Ricky Henderson
kind of get my
is
frustration.
just shit.
He did one good thing. I saw him do the smartest thing he's ever done on a football field. I think it was in the first quarter when he did come back on.
Was it going to the bench?
No, he didn't do that quick enough. That's why they got their goal, because he was lying on the ground going, oh, I hurt. There was the ball's on the ground. He's on the ground as well. He actually put his leg.
Put his foot there, yeah.
Yes. Okay, smartest thing I've ever seen Henderson done. He got a clap and a cheer for us for that. Rest of the game, yeah. So he did one good thing.
Just avoids contact.
Look,
well, actually, when he came back on in the third quarter, I reckon he got a rocket. He got told he needed to get the body involved, because he actually did a little bit in the third quarter. He still pulled out from a couple.
Yeah, he does it on
contests.
his own terms. He does it on his own terms, Henderson. I've noticed that when things are in his favour, he'll put in a tackle or whatever. But I have to say that if an AFL footballer who's been in the system as long as he has can't take a hip and shoulder bump from Lockie Whitfield, there's something like... I understand he's had a few concussion issues, hasn't he, Henderson? And it might have just rattled the brain a little bit. But to be perfectly frank, seeing him go down in our defence there off what should have been a 50-50 contest with Whitfield, and he shouldn't have actually even gone down, it really highlighted to me just how not prepared for body contact Hendo really is.
He is probably the most outside players in our entire list. It's actually a surprise that he had 5 contested possessions for the match out of his 13. Thought that was a little bit surprising, but I think some of the people on the board were mentioning that he was actively avoiding contests during the match, and I think that's pretty disgraceful for an AFL footballer. Not that I've looked at the replay to see when that was actually occurring, but he's just... Please drop him. Someone, please just get him out. And never play him in defence ever.
Look, when he came in, or when he was sort of around the conversation, my comment at the time was just don't play him in defence. He's actually a good run and carry player. He can take an overhead mark, and his kicking is good. He laced one out to, I think it was Sloaney at one stage, I think it might have been third quarter. And his field kicking is generally okay. I think he's a little bit behind on our game plan and takes too long with ball in hand at times when the players slow down. But there's a spot for him similar to a David McKay type spot. He's good in the areas that he's good, but unfortunately he's just not a complete player.
I was just going to say I'd be happy for him to go back to Victoria at the end of this year.
Yeah, maybe his contract trigger won't be triggered for how many games he has to play. I'm not sure, but I think hopefully he won't trigger anything and we can piss him off as a free agent or something. But yeah, I'm not sure whether he's the best option on the outside anyway, considering we have a plethora of outside players in our squad at the moment. I just think that the other guys we've got in our squad offer a bit more than Henderson and really his SANFL quality at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. Just going back to the topic of switching, Nikki, I felt we did it more than usual, and whilst we were a little bit slow early in the game, we certainly sped up our switch and became more aggressive with the switch as the game went on. And I felt like it was a real key to the game plan that Pike brought to the game this week, in that he was trying to stretch GWS's midfield as much as he could, for 2 reasons. First of all, to give us room into the corridor, and we actually used the corridor more than what GWS did, certainly through the first 3 quarters. But the last quarter really showed us why, because when GWS do run, they chain handball and they run quite close together, and by spreading their midfielders, it actually reduces their efficiency and their ability to run hard through that centre corridor. And I felt it was a really good tactic by Pike, to use the width of the ground as much as possible and then swing back into the corridor on our terms when we'd spread their midfielders a bit wide. Did you see it at the ground that way?
Yeah, I did. Though it's interesting because they were talking about how the narrowness of Adelaide Oval will actually be restrictive on GWS, who do like to, because I think their stadium's wider. I thought that was kind of an interesting comment.
Yeah, Skoda, I think, is the same dimensions as the MCG, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
But we really did try to stretch them wide, and you could tell even...
Yeah, we made them play our game.
Yeah, and then we would then cut back into the corridor, and a lot of our forward entries were from the centre square or thereabouts, which was really good because over the last few weeks we've been forced wide and there's been a lot of stoppages on our forward 50 line, towards the boundary or out of bounds, whereas there wasn't that much this time around. The only one resulted in Eddie Betts' goal of the millennium.
Well, Nathan Brown on the Channel 9 footy show this morning said he thinks it's the best goal of the past 2 decades. I think there might have been some other really good ones in there. But, it was a pretty fair goal. What he also pointed out was the fact that we stopped GWS from once they got that kick out to the side from point, they were immediately looking inside, trying to bring it into the centre, but we'd blocked the space and they had to kick down the line instead.
Yeah, and I felt that's probably the area where Leon Cameron would probably have been most dirty on them, because I actually, watching the replay, it struck me that GWS seemed to be playing quite lazy football. They weren't running hard, they weren't running for each other. There were a lot of contests where we outnumbered them at the fall of the ball, and I felt like they might have just got a little bit ahead of themselves this week, GWS, and Cameron probably would have put it to them a couple of times during the match, and certainly the last quarter when we tied, they certainly put it together. But I didn't feel like they were running as hard as what they have done in previous weeks.
No, because they weren't allowed to.
Well, yeah, but even I think this was probably indicative of the style of play that Pikey put in place. The fact that the game was spread quite wide, and we're not the quickest team going around, but the fact that we were using it by foot meant that they had to cover a lot of ground, and they either weren't prepared to run or didn't have the ability to run enough to get to a lot of contests. And it was a really good strategy by Pikey. It stuck out to me quite early that we were doing that.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, the other thing that I felt was good to see, obviously, was the return to form of Mr. Walker.
Oh, he took the game by the scruff of the neck.
18 disposals, 10 marks, 5 goals, 3, obviously. Really good to see Tex back up and about and running on top of the ground. 6 marks inside 50. And again, I think the other thing that I mentioned early on tonight was we dropped the eyes a lot more going into forward 50 than we have done in previous weeks. Possibly because of the game plan that we were using out of our defence, we were able to create space in our forward 50 and we were hitting up short. A lot of our shots at goal were from 30 to 50 metres out. And that's Tex's domain right there.
Yeah, he was excellent on the night, and I think we started to see some of that form coming back in the Gold Coast match, but of course their opposition wasn't too strong, whereas in the GWS game he was absolutely outstanding, and I think he was probably the best on ground for us at least. I did notice, however, in the start that GWS's defence, this is in the first quarter, GWS's defence was all over the place. They had absolutely no structure and just allowed Taylor Walker to get free pretty much every single time there was a ball heading inside the forward 50. Oh, yeah, I mean, their defence, all their injuries have all hit at once, and it's disappointing for them, but we were able to really capitalise on that through Walker and Betts.
And not only
that...
And
what I also liked...
Go on, Nick.
I was just about to say is that you said that what you wanted to see was on Tuesday Night Live, we had to make sure that Heath Shaw was manned up, even if there was a loose man.
Yeah.
But what was really interesting is that in the last quarter, when GWS finally decided to set up the loose man, and Shaw was the one who was dictating who was manned up, he didn't make himself loose. He was still on Betts.
Yeah,
so
I
we
think
made
he had
sure
a job, actually.
he had to man up Betts. And if it wasn't Betts, it was Cameron. And they ran him ragged.
You'd have to think that's down to personnel, because given that Shaw was so effective in quarterbacking last week, the fact that they had to assign him to a player is both indicative of our forward depth, but also indicative, I think, of their lack of defenders at the moment. They're very light on in defence with their injuries. And I think not having Shaw being able to be the general down back there really cost them in terms of their rebounding out of our forward 50.
In the last quarter, or partway through the third quarter, they had to send Patton down to man up on JJ.
Well, I think that was half forced by injury.
Yeah.
But I thought Patton did a reasonable job,
and he wasn't playing well up forward.
No, but I thought he did a reasonable job down back, actually. Didn't look completely fish out of water like I thought he might. But yeah, they're struggling in defence, and obviously, as long as they can get forward of the ball, they're fine because they've got so much strength through the mids and up forward. But we were able to control the tempo of the game for the best part. We were able to use the width of the ground and then switch into the corridor when we needed to, and our forward entries were very effective. Had we been accurate, obviously, would have been an even better story for us. But I just felt like it was the complete game. And as I said at the beginning of this little stats roundup, everyone had a role to play, and everyone seemed to play that role to perfection.
I'm going to give 2 slight brickbats to players. Jake Lever needs to understand his limitations in terms of disposals. Oh, that handball, couple of his kicks. It was just like, Jake, I love you, but no, stop it.
It makes you wonder what these bloody stats are, because Lever's running at 74% of his disposal efficiency, and yet had 7 clangers. So
yeah, I know.
I don't know.
Yeah, who knows what's going on there? And the other one is actually Miller. He played okay, and he did some really nice things. What I dislike is he'll get to space, and then he still thinks he's in the SNFL, so he can stand still.
Yeah, he doesn't attack the ball, does he?
He doesn't attack the ball. He stands there and waits for the ball to come to him instead of going towards the ball, which is why those couple of intercepts happen.
Yeah, he got
now he's not afraid of body contact at all. So I was actually wondering after the game, should we actually rest him for a little bit or send him back to the SNFL to realise, no, you can't get away with that at this level? Or I think it will depend on how he actually takes constructive criticism best. It could be that he is a player that needs to be dropped. It could be that they just need to tell him and to work on it, and he could then stay in the team at the higher level. So that'll be up to the coaching staff. But I would hope they'll be working on some little things like that, because he's fearless when he's going for the ball. He as I said, he doesn't mind the hard contact.
What do you reckon, Scorpus?
But there are a couple of moments.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree that I think it's probably we've seen enough from Miller to know that he's going to be an absolute star player for us. When he's got the ball in hand, he can do some magnificent things. But like you said, I just don't think he's getting enough ball at the moment. His 8 disposals on the weekend has been pretty typical for him throughout most of his games at AFL level. And considering we know that he can get those disposals, he needs to go back and start working in the SNFL on his ball getting ability. I think in the SNFL, when he played that one match, he seemed to be quite good. So we know that he's probably going to start dominating that level pretty quickly. But there are definitely some things he needs to work on. The main issue that I have is that if we're dropping Miller, the replacements that we have, I'm not sure how they would go. I mean, we could bring back David McKay when he is fit. Obviously, he's injured at the moment, but I'm not a huge McKay fan, and I don't think he brings all that much to our team. And the other guy, Troy Menzel, he hasn't been all that good in his SANFL games so far. I think he's a bit out of form and fitness. So, yeah, he's probably not ready to come back in either.
It's more fitness, not so much form. When he's on there, the couple of times that I've seen him live, the form's there. It's just that fitness is not letting him to perform consistently at the level that we want. And we knew that. The club actually was very much at pains to explain this. I don't think McKay would come in for him. McKay would hopefully come in for Henderson. For me, I wonder if they're keeping him in because we've heard our forwards all talk. So Tex and Eddie and Lynch and JJ all talk about how they have to play together. They've had to play together for a period of time so that they can understand each other and they can learn from it. And we're seeing that that's really clicking, that because we've kept them. together. And I think that's also true with our backline. So I wonder if that's why we've kept Miller in, because it's just getting him to understand how everybody else works around you. Now, McGovern had a low possession game, and I know some people on the board thought he was crap and everything else. It's like, I'm sorry, you did not watch the game, because almost the vast majority of our goals or scores were created from either a pass from him, a good block, that little tap that he actually did to Walker for his first goal. That he deliberately directed that into Walker's path beautifully. And if you go back and you watch Eddie Betts' goal, McGovern's the one who's there, and watch his feet when he realises that Eddie's going to get possession of the ball. He basically dances his feet around to make sure that he's protecting the ball so Eddie can get it. That's incredibly smart footy IQ in a split second to make. So whilst he wasn't clunking his marks, wasn't quite clicking, that goal after the siren and some of his other work, I'm very happy to keep him in the team.
What I like most about McGovern is his physical presence. Every time he lays a tackle or a bump,
he hurts them.
You see the opponent slow to get up off the ground. I can't remember who it was. It was on the outer side in the quintessential Eddie Betts pocket, where he hit
Whitfield.
Someone. Was it Whitfield? Was it? Yeah,
it was Whitfield. He hit.
He got him just after the kick, and my God, the guy just doesn't get up. So I like McGovern. I think he's probably got to be more confident about when it's his turn to go that he goes. I think in the air he's still a bit concerned about whose way he might be getting in. In terms of Miller, I think his biggest problem at the moment is that he's just not seeing enough of the ball, and I don't think a spell in the twos would do him too much harm, just to allow him to get the ball 25 times in his hand. I think he's just lost a little bit of touch. I've noticed he's not quite as clean over the last couple of weeks handling the ball.
Yeah.
And I think he could, just for that reason alone, I think he could do with just going back to the twos and having 25 touches. And as for who comes in, well, I think you could probably mix and match with the current midfield rotations a little bit to cover that one.
Yeah, I mean, you could make Lyons do a little bit more work up forward, which he's done before, and he's very good up forward. He's not quick like Miller, so we lose that speed, but he's quick in terms of his footy brain and nous.
Yeah, he is good. He is good around goals, Jared Lyons. I actually felt Lyons did a really good job. He's starting to just create a little niche for himself there. Whether he survives the inclusion of the Crouch boys, I'm not sure, but he's certainly done himself no harm, Jared Lyons, since he's been in. The other guy that I want to talk about is Rory Atkins. We touched on him, obviously, at the beginning here. There was one piece of play in particular that really impressed me. He had the ball on the members' wing, and Lyons was on the outside about 20 metres up the ground towards the boundary, screaming for it. Atkins checked his kick to Lyons, came inboard and laced out Tex, and Lyons went from remonstrating with Rory to basically going, yeah, that's pretty good. And I love the decision making and the time that Atkins has. It's very impressive.
Yeah, I think he's really come into a better version of David McKay in terms of if we had David McKay that had that same good disposal, he's a mostly outside player. He had good ability to evade contests and everything like that, and he can actually tackle. I think he's definitely the guy that I want to see stay in the team in that role that McKay's playing, and hopefully we can start to see McKay get relegated.
And that's good that those younger players are basically keeping out a lot of the ones that previously made up the core of our team. And that means that they're fighting hard in the twos, putting pressure on those younger players to perform at a consistent level to stay in. And it's a very great problem to have.
Definitely. And, you know, I mean, let's compare Atkins to McKay in terms of poise, in terms of decision-making, in terms of disposal efficiency. It's not a contest. So I agree with you, Scorpus. Atkins is definitely an upgrade on McKay. And he's only going to get better. He's got another pre-season to get to full AFL body size, I would imagine, which may see him get a little bit more contested ball. But at the moment, in terms of his outside work, he's certainly added something to our team. No one else really to pinpoint. We've talked about the defence. We've talked about the forwards. We've talked about the general game plan. I'm just going to say one sentence and then I'm going to let you two discuss it. Did we or did we not capitulate in the last quarter? Scorpus.
Well, I think you're pulling me up on some of the comments I was saying on the board about our
Not
capitulation. Yes, I think we really put our foot off the gas pedal in the last quarter, and considering we kicked 5 unanswered goals and really allowed GWS to come straight back into the game, that I was extremely frustrated watching the game on TV and everything, and just saying, you know, we had so many opportunities throughout that last quarter to kick the one single goal that we needed to ice the match, and whether it was Douglas kicking a horrendous shit kick through the goals to behinds or whatever and missing from directly out in front and Jenkins stuffing up marks and everything. We did everything we possibly could to lose that match in the last quarter. I don't think it's a huge issue considering we did so well in the previous 3 quarters, but I think it's becoming a trend with us throughout the first definitely 10 rounds now that we're having issues in the last quarter that we need to address.
Nikki.
I'm going to go with no. Because what I actually saw there, I was getting angry in that last quarter, but I was getting angry at the umpires. Almost every single one of the GWS goals had a free kick that should have been paid to us before that goal happened, in the run of play that happened. There was some very interesting decisions that was being made, is what I will say. And if you go back and watch the replay, they're there, and the commentators very much noticed a lot of those free kicks not being paid.
Stop blaming the umpires.
We still had... well, if it happens, that happens. We still had a lot of entries into the forward 50, but we kind of turned it back into our second quarter ways, unfortunately. They did lift. A lot of people were getting nervous around us where I was sitting, but it was like, well, hang on. They've got to basically completely outscore their entire score that they made in order to beat us. And yeah, they're running a bit better through the midfield, but we were still getting those. We were still stopping them for periods of time. We were controlling the play. It was just that forward 50 entry which was lacking. So whilst I agree with Scorpus that there are some issues there, I think it's more to do with being tired.
I feel like my own personal point of view is I felt like we tired in the last quarter, but it wasn't necessarily capitulation. Yeah. I felt like we worked extremely hard to quell their midfield when the game mattered, particularly in the third quarter. I did feel, as I said earlier, that GWS were playing a little bit lazy. But that said, you're right. We didn't. It wasn't as if they dominated possession in the last quarter. We certainly had our fair share of the ball. We had a fair share of forward entries, and but for a couple of lapses in concentration, we still probably would have kicked 3 goals in that last quarter. I think that the indicator to me was that whilst Pikey said after in his presser that he got the heart ticking a little bit, he didn't seem to want to change structure, throw anyone back, put anyone behind the ball, any of that sort of stuff. They did only get within 3 goals, and well, 3.5 goals really. So they're never really that close. Is it a concern? I think it's a minor concern. I would have thought that perhaps a move could have been made earlier just to slow the game down a little bit and maybe put one back just to clog up their defence. But really where they were cutting us up was in the midfield, and I think that was basically because our midfielders were tired. And given that we have a more mature and not as pacey midfield, it was probably always going to happen at some point, and it basically happened when the game was dead.
Yeah,
and
I just was interesting in the aftermatch. He was asked about that, about what they kind of thought in that last quarter, and he just said, we just went away a little bit from what we'd been concentrating on, and all you have to have then is the other team just lift that little extra, and results kind of like that happen. So whilst he said that he kind of backed up what Pike said about the ticker, he said they weren't actively concerned so much in the coach's box. He was asked what Pike said regarding Lynch and the Douglas kick. And what Pike was upset about was that Lynch didn't go back and take the kick. He didn't mind if Lynch kicked a point because he would have taken 30 seconds off the clock, which I thought was a very interesting mindset into Pike a little bit. In that he's it on the players if they don't like kick the goals like we do.
I think that was just very much. I think that was more about the moment in the game. I think he'd be pissed off. It's
creating smart footballers.
Yeah, well, it's about composure, isn't it? And again, a case could be made for Dougie to not run past and to actually pull up and talk to Lynch and say, settle back, take 30 seconds and slot it. So I think we do lack a little bit of composure. It looked like he had started
to slow down.
No, I think we do lack composure. I think that there'll be a lot of time spent over the coming weeks at training getting some more composure and understanding what to do at certain times in the game. I think we do lack there. What do you reckon, Scorpus?
Yeah, I think we just need to get into the mindset in the final quarter that instead of switching off completely or switching off to an extent, that we need to see it as an opportunity once we get into a strong position in the third quarter to continue to put the foot down. Because if we, for example, instead of being 8 goals up, we were only 5 goals up, we might have still become into that same mindset that we could ease off, and that would have resulted in, assuming that they played the same way, that GWS would have gotten mighty close to mounting a comeback into a leading position. So, yeah, it's just... I think it could come to hurt us if we're still in this mindset that we can completely switch off in the fourth quarter.
Well, lack of composure has already hurt us this year. You could argue there's been a couple of games that we've lost due to lack of composure at key points in the game. Brody Smith's missed kick to Seedsman. What was the other one? Was it McGovern or something? I can't remember the other one. There was another one. But I think there is a case to be made that we lack composure in trying to close a game out, and I think the coaching staff would be remiss to not address it. That being said, I felt like your comments, Nikki, are correct. I think we did move away from structure in the end. I think that was down to tiredness as much as anything else. But it should prove to the players that when they stick to the game plan, it works.
Yeah.
So stick to the bloody game plan.
If anybody actually wants to kind of get a little gauge on what Pike's like in terms of coaching, the Crow Show last night, and it's up on the club's YouTube page, actually has an excerpt they mic'd up. This is going to rhyme. Mic'd up Pike at training. And it's really interesting to hear what he says and how he says it to particular players. He also joined in training. He had his footy boots on and he was apparently being a forward. Apparently none of the defenders wanted to go and stand on him.
That's because no one ever Malthouse never picked him as a forward. That's why he's just making up for lost time.
He was doing it there. But that's actually really interesting to watch. And the other interesting thing I found last night was in the aftermatch functions. You had Teague and they brought up Millera and Charlie. And anytime Teague was speaking, Charlie was just watching him with such intensity. Just listening to every word he was saying.
Well, certainly Charlie Cameron, and we probably haven't talked enough about Charlie. He's slowly but surely taking his game to another level. And you can see that whereas in the past he's kind of lived in Eddie's shadow and being very, what's the word? He's kind of looked up to Eddie. Now Charlie is his own player. Charlie's realised, I think, and if that's Teague, and it could well be, then that's excellent, that Charlie's developed now into his own player, and I think he's starting to believe. And, geez, we get a couple of pre-seasons into him and get that tank running, and he's going to be a dynamic player through the middle of the ground.
He did so much running last night, and he was so buggered at times. But part of the reason why we were getting that great run on everything else was just work that he was either doing to provide a link, or even if we didn't use it, it was still making GWS chase. It was still making them spread. That tackle on Heath Shaw was absolutely a delight to watch happen. And I think it's actually a bit partly down to not just Teague. From what I could see, there seemed to be such respect with what Teague was saying, and I can understand why Walshy was so keen on getting Teague to the club. But it's also, as Eddie said, that Charlie's now become a man. He's moved out with his girlfriend. He's learning to deal with money. And basically Eddie's saying he's, starting to grow. And I think that him starting to grow as a person, which I think we can put down a lot to Eddie's mentorship a bit as well. And he's coming out of his shell. He's no longer that little shy boy who kept his eyes down. And I think he didn't quite think he belonged, but now they seem to have this, they've put this confidence in him to say, no, take the game on. You're allowed to make mistakes. Take the game on. That's what we want to see.
And, it's interesting because Charlie is a classic case of SANFL form not being indicative of a player's worth. He got brought into the team, and he's been brought into the team a couple of times on the back of some only mediocre SANFL form. And I don't want to harp on about this because we've got other shows to do that, but I think it's a similar situation to Brad Crouch. And I think Charlie has benefited from playing in our team at times where he probably hasn't deserved a spot. And I think we're seeing the consequence of that development and that faith that we've put in him. And I'd like the same development path shown to Brad Crouch as well. But anyway, that's a topic for probably Tuesday Night Live or something. We got a couple of minutes left.
Pike, just quickly on that, Pike was on the Channel 9 footy show this morning, and he was asked about Brad Crouch, and what he said is, we just want consistency of performance from him. We're mindful that he's had that year out. It's just that's what we're looking for. So that's probably the first inkling of the information we've got from the club of exactly what they're looking for from him.
Oh, I don't know whether you can take that at face value. But Pike is not. Pike is a closed shop to the media.
No. Oh yeah, he is, but I think there's something there, and part of that would also be a bit of a message to Brad, I think. And what I'm always mindful of listening to Pike is often it's what he doesn't say, but he does let little things slip every so often.
What do you reckon, Scorpus?
So he finally let out that it was his toe. So we finally know what Tex was injured with.
Yeah, we knew that a couple of weeks ago.
We didn't know toe, we knew foot.
Oh, well, toe, foot.
The club was
reckon,
vague
Scorpus?
beforehand, and now he's being specific.
What,
What
Scorpus
about
turn?
Brad Crouch?
Yeah, just the similarities between how they've brought Charlie in and how they're currently managing Brad.
Well, I mean, you know from the preview cast that I think that they shouldn't have dropped Brad Crouch after those 2 games coming back from his hamstring injury. But yeah, I agree. I think Brad Crouch he's kind of a different situation to Cameron in that Brad Crouch dominates the SANFL, whereas Charlie Cameron, as you said, his form in that league isn't as good as we've seen in the AFL. I think there's some merit to Pike's words saying about his consistency. We haven't seen consistency from Brad Crouch this season. Well, it's been consistently pretty mediocre, to be honest, but I think we really needed to back him in the AFL and see him get touch there and get up to speed in the AFL. His management, I think, has been pretty poor. The player I'd more closely liken to Cameron's situation is probably Troy Menzel. I still think he has a lot to offer for us, and I'm not sure whether we'll ever see that really standout, super dominating game from Menzel in the SNFL. But if we bring him into the AFL, we might really see what he's made of. But that's something we hopefully will see later this season.
Well, it could be a sneaky in for Miller, particularly with a couple of we got the Saints up this week. You never know; they might decide to give Miller a rest and gift Troy a game just to give him a taste.
That would excite me, that's for sure.
The other one in that conversation is Greenwood.
Yeah, I don't know yet.
Don't think he's quite ready.
Don't know yet.
Not that I've seen any ASNFL.
Anyway, we're over the hour.
Good.
So let's wrap this up. We've obviously no SNFL game to talk about this week, which is why we spent a little bit more time on the GWS game. Next week, let's not spend too much time on it, but just a brief comment from me. I just see it as a dangerous game. The Saints aren't playing terrible footy. Yes, it's at home, but it's at the bloody awful time slot of 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. What the hell is that?
Yeah, I mean, the time slot's pretty bad, but I think we won't be troubled by the Saints at all. I think we will come out and give them a good touch-up.
The Saints are actually good, but they can't sustain it. They get a little bit of a run on, but then their youth shows and they drop back down. So whilst I partly agree with you, Phoenix, it is a danger and we have to be switched on because they are actually a good side that's building. I think the confidence we've got from this game, but also that little lapse in a way when we tied in the last quarter is enough to keep, I think, the players switched on.
Yeah, because it's quite a pivotal round this week. We've got some games that really shape the 8. We've got the Cats up against the Giants. We've got the Bulldogs up against West Coast. Even Hawthorn, Melbourne, the way Hawthorn have been travelling of late, they're a bit up and down, so you never know. So there's a couple of games there that are going to have an impact on the rankings in the 8, and certainly a good win against the Saints and a couple of results going our way could see us just relieve the pressure a little bit and get us away from 8th spot. So, we'll leave it there and talk about it more on Tuesday and Thursday, but I think it's really important that we give the Saints a good touch-up on Sunday. And it's, for those listening, I think it's Kids Free Week next week. So I plan to take my kids.
It is.
We got 2 of them, haven't we? And the first one's the Saints. I think the other one's the Bombers. So given that my 8-year-old is currently a trader and barracking for Hawthorn, the bloody bandwagoner, I need to take him to a Crows game that we're going to win. So what better game than
well, there's 2 there, should be.
That's all right. So, I don't know, guys. I reckon that's about it. What do you reckon? Any final comments?
Nathan Van Burler needs to be dropped shit.
You were waiting. I'm going to smack you next time.
Oh, come on, Nikki. He does need to be dropped. Don't even. Yes.
No. He's in, Because do we have anything else? And he's doing the job that he's doing. He's not actually performing that badly is what people think.
Oh, come on.
Sorry.
He's been
No.
terrible.
Oh, God, we're going to go for another 15 minutes now. I thought we were going to get through without a Nathan Van Velo discussion.
Scorpus' fault. It's just we don't have anything else at the moment
Harry
to be
Wigg.
in place of him. He's midfield.
Yes.
He's not down back.
He's not midfield. He's only been put through the midfield this year. He's played a lot of football off halfback, and he can play.
So you want our club to go back on the development that they're doing with him and put him back in the back lines.
It didn't hurt Andrew McLeod. I'm sorry, but
He's
players need to be flexible, Nikki. And Harry Wigg has experience running off halfback, and he gives us far more weapons offensively, and he has potential to be a far more positive influence on a game than Nathan Van Berlo. And we need to get games into these kids. And VB, I know that Cheney credited him for helping with the Stevie J matchup, but VB does not give us anything, and he's not part of our future, and he needs to be dropped. And Harry Wigg would be the obvious replacement.
To me, he's kind of like the lettuce in a burger. He's just there for filler. He's making up the numbers. He's not anything really.
He's a sesame seed on the burger. He's not even the lettuce. I don't mind lettuce.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, maybe
he's the napkin.
Sesame seed.
He's the packaging. No, he's not even I don't know what he is. The stuff that you throw away at the end of the meal. And I'm sorry,
like
because
the sauce packet or something.
Yeah, that's right. Look, and we're being harsh and a bit flippant. And VB has been excellent for the club, and we can't deny that. But since the sled accident and just the way the game's been played these days, and we've seen it for the last couple of years, VB has just has lost a yard of pace. He seems to be far less composed with ball in hand than he used to be. I see him run past tackles. I saw it last week. I saw it again this weekend. And despite anything else, Nick, we need to get games into these young players. We need to give them a taste. Wigg's been on our list now. This is his second season on our list. He's been playing well, and he's been cooling his heels now for 3 weeks. It'll be 3 weeks between games for Wigg, and I just think that he needs to get a run, and he can play halfback, and he should be given the opportunity to play halfback. My cat should play off halfback before Nathan Van Berlo.
I'd honestly play like Luke Loudon.
As I said, Kyle Cheney liked him down there.
Anyway, on that note, and I'm sure that we'll discuss this in more detail on Tuesday night. Once again,
Pete's made some interesting comments.
Yes, once again, thank you to those on the chat. We didn't really acknowledge people on the chat tonight, but thanks to those that were listening. Don't forget, the Crowbar Boys will be giving their unique take on things tomorrow night. They'll upload their podcast at some stage tomorrow night. We've got Peter and the crew back on Tuesday Night Live to talk about things in more depth, and maybe if the club get their asses into gear, we might have a player interview. And then Scorpus will be back on Thursday to talk us through the teams and preview the game against the Saints next week. So hope everyone's enjoyed listening to us ramble on for an hour or so, and thank you to Scorpus. Thanks for stopping in, mate.
Yeah, no worries.
And Nikki, go and get a steak on those hamstrings and whatever else hurts at the moment. Thigh, and we won't talk about it. And thank you very much, and good night.
See ya!
See you later.
Good night, guys.